good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Of course, we are having this great conference, the World University Summit. We are in session 11, and we have many more to go. Of course, since we are here, let's talk about a very interesting topic today, which is responsible research, harnessing knowledge resources for creating tangible social impact. And we have, a sort of a great panel here this morning. Professor Martin, who is Vice Chancellor of Deakin University, Australia. We have Professor Mohammad, who is the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Universiti, Kebangsaan, Malaysia. We have Professor Robel, former Provost and Executive Vice President, Indiana University, and Professor Youmin Xi, Vice Chancellor, University of Liverpool, Liverpool University, China. So thank you to all the panelists for joining this morning, this afternoon, this evening. There are many questions that would come to my mind, even start the discussion, especially the title of the research or the title of this session, Responsible Research, throws many questions. Responsible research, if you look at the fundamental ethos behind academic research or otherwise, whether responsible research brings in some kind of disciplinary dependency, so to speak. And I also, during the session, we'll be talking about, what are the kind of strategic competencies possibly universities should adopt while catering to responsible research. And going to the threshold, for promoting inclusive and sustainable research, the kind of ecosystem that one should have in the university setup, and what kind of usefulness would collaborative research would have amongst all these expectations. And finally, the question that we should ask ourselves would be whether COVID-19 or the effect of COVID-19 actually has triggered a paradigm shift, so to speak. So that brings me to the first question of this session. Have there been any major shifts in the discourses on the responsible research in times of the ongoing pandemic? What kind of attitudinal changes do you anticipate towards the scientific research, in particular in the aftermath of COVID-19? Before I, I'll go by, Professor, this order, Professor Martin, Mohammad, Professor Robel, and Professor Youmin. Before you answer this question, I would also request you to spend 30 seconds on what exactly to you would be responsible research. I'll start with Professor Martin. Thank you.
It's a very easy question to ask, but quite a hard question to answer. And I think there's two ways of thinking about responsible research. One is that is research carried out in a framework where we are responsible for the quality of it, we're responsible for the integrity of it, and we are accountable for ensuring that the research is conducted in a way that we can trust the results. And I think the second paradigm is it is responsible as in we as universities have a responsibility to carry out research that will drive progress. And I think they're both different sides of the coin, but they are really important. And I can't talk for other jurisdictions, but the last 18 months have been really interesting in terms of thinking about how that's played out in the university world. So on one level, we've probably seen greater trust and greater engagement with science, the science of pandemics, the science of epidemiology, the science of vaccine production. And we've probably had more university academics come up and be commentators in the mainstream media than we've seen for a very long time. But the flip side of that is that the narrative and the noise around we can't trust experts, there's a problem here, this is a conspiracy, has probably been louder as well. So I think both sides have strengthened their voice and we've drifted apart. But I think if I put the two together, I think it probably has strengthened the role of research that is focused on making an impact to the communities we're embedded in. It's still probably too soon to know, but this sort of very strange polarization that certainly we've seen a little bit in Australia, looking at the news, certainly in the US, I'm less familiar about other countries, but it has been there and I think is a very real phenomenon, at least for us.
Thank you, Professor Martin. Professor Mohammad?
Okay, well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to this session. For me, responsible research, this is definitely something that is very important for all the academics who really understand it very well. And I think responsible research should be look into solving the problems that we are facing as a nation. I mean, at least in our country. I mean, this pandemic has shown us the fact that probably we have not been focusing on certain areas that will be important for the country. Yeah, just taking, for example, in terms of the COVID pandemic, suddenly the government was asking us, the universities, where are your research on virus, for example, and the fact that we cannot come up immediately with that particular solution, that posed a very big question to us, whether we have been trying to do responsible research all the way along the way to up until now. So for me, responsible research means basically you have now to see clearly what would be the issues and problems that are relevant to the country first. Yeah, because the funding, most of it would come from our own country, and I mean, in my case, from Malaysia. So we have to see the kind of issues and that are needed and required for the country, and everyone should work together towards achieving or solving those issues and problems first. Yeah, so that at the end of the day, our research result or output or whatever will be beneficial for the country. And this is some people, I think this is again an argument that is going to creeping up again all the time, because you're talking about fundamental knowledge, you're talking about research that are important for the countries and so on, and we have to find ways to balance all of this, and that for me would be a good definition of responsible research, I think.
Thank you, Professor Mohammad. Professor Robel?
I'd love to follow up on a theme I heard from both Professor Martin and Professor Mohammad, and that is the increasing demand for research that has immediate social impacts that can be measured within a country. And I feel very strongly that we do have to listen carefully to that drumbeat of political skepticism towards our research missions. But I also want to pick up on what Professor Mohammad said about the balance, because we are the only institutions that do the kind of fundamental research that pushes a field forward. And we will always be facing the political push to focus most of our research on inquiries that have immediate social payoffs. We have to hold on to the other piece. And for me, as I've thought through this, I've thought that universities have to be very intentional about their understanding of the politics surrounding the social impact side, and very careful to protect the push within disciplines for fundamental knowledge, because that latter piece is easy to lose in the and it's what makes universities universities. Really, it's what we do that is unique. No one else does it in the way that we do.
Thank you, Professor Robel. Professor Youmin?
As Martin has mentioned, that responsible research is an easy question to ask and difficult to answer, but I would like to answer in an easy way. Normally, most of the researchers are understanding very well about relevance and rigorous, but at this environment, we are facing many challenges from different perspectives. For example, there are a lot of noise or attractiveness which will attract the researchers to a wrong direction or wrong way. So I would like to highlight two perspectives. One is to follow the scholar's heart to conduct research in this turbulent environment. And another one is to face the really demand from society, from humans being demands in long term. That's easy to see, but difficult to follow. So I think if we want to be a true university, we want to be a true scholars, we should follow this, our own heart and the future development trend and demand by avoiding the disturbance from the different noise sources. That's my understanding of responsible research.
Thank you to all the panelists for their opening remarks. I think there is a, we shouldn't have a great divide between what is required to what we ought to be doing in terms of, our love or passion. So therefore, there has to be a balance, and I believe that, that balance is very difficult to attain. It will take us time because the situation that we are all going through at the moment may sort of trigger research in some way and not sort of neglecting research in other areas. But going by the given the situation that we are in, do you think that the current mechanisms for assessing research productivity would still be considered adequate? And how can we possibly ensure that these mechanisms, the existing mechanisms, encourage responsible research, and it's also, sort of have some kind of societal impact, and it sort of follows, the nomenclature of common good? And so I would sort of, start with maybe, this time, Professor Youmin, what do you think about the existing, mechanisms that we have, given the balance that you want to have in the university structure? Because the terms like productivity and other aspects, right, those are, important terms, right? Depends on how you see them. So the current mechanisms for assessing research productivity, whether they are still considered to be adequate, given the balance that we want to sort of, have. And how do you, what kind of mechanisms would you adopt to drive home the point of responsible research, kind of impact that it would have, and of course the common good that that kind of research would have as well? Professor Youmin.
Actually, we are, university is a very interesting organization. We can take it as a knowledge worker and a knowledge organization, but according to the Peter Drucker, the university's system or operation system is not good for the efficiency of knowledge work and knowledge organization, because we are isolated by department, by schools, by the index. So from this perspective, it's very crucial for a university to avoid the silos, to develop the interdisciplinary education. So I think that's the first very fundamental or basic issue for the university to help the scholars to have a high productivity for research. So in order to do so, in our university, for example, we have been trying very hard to restructure the university organization structure. We developed a 4 centers seamless connected platform to give all the students, staff, no matter which departments they are, could cooperate freely and friendly to carry out the research. And this has helped us to produce many very high quality research results. I think that's the first perspective for us to improve our research within the university. And the second strategy or mechanism is to strengthen the collaboration between university and the community or industry sector. Traditionally, we have had such kind of cooperation, but there are a lot of barriers or obstacles for the cooperation because benefits are pursued by different institutions. So in last few years, we have been trying to develop a new system to support the integration between university institutions and the industry sector. For example, we have developed a new campus. We are trying to develop a new system, educational system and a research system, which is focusing on the integrative education. That means a new way for us to integrate the knowledge from different sectors. Traditional university used to use a disciplinary way to organize the teaching and research, but we are trying to use the industry to integrate the knowledge of fields in disciplinary. So we call it integrative. It's a synergy and integrative, which should have some chemical reaction. In this way, we have combined scholars in university, experts in industry, and some specialists in the society together to create a research platform. So in our, we call it research and educational institution, in which we have 3 different kinds of researchers. So which will bring the research result into industry, into society, and also bring the problems, phenomena, or challenges faced by industry or by society to university. So university is playing a role as a glue to integrate all the relevant elements and create an ecosystem to play as a catalyst to help all the elements to generate new ideas or new research products. So that's our second research mechanism. Recently, we developed our third research mechanism. We take university as a place to generate or create ecosystem to attract industry together to develop an innovation ecosystem, which can combine basically research, innovative and R&D research together. So that's 3 ways for us to help our university or our society to generate a responsible research.
I think so very well put, Mr. Youmin. I think the 3-pronged approach and the synthesis that you have talked about, it's really a chemical reaction, you know, and you know, in a positive note, with a positive note. Professor Robel, do you think that you would do something else in addition? And how is the situation, maybe say at Indiana, and the things that you would probably like to do in addition to what Professor Youmin has said? Thank you.
I have seen at a number of other universities, particularly in China, what Professor Youmin is describing around the synthesis of industry and academic institutions, research efforts, and it is a very powerful collaboration. I think another way you can go about that is to pick a social sector and try to bring people from their disciplines into attacking a common problem. So at Indiana, we created about 3 years ago a center for rural engagement, that has taken a series of issues that rural communities in the United States are facing and brought together disciplinary folks from public health, from computing and engineering, from just across the entire spectrum, including the arts and humanities, to surround, if you will, communities and work with them around the kinds of issues they're facing. I have found that has really invigorated our faculty members around their research, because they're engaged with people who have immediate needs, and their concerns, the faculty members' concerns and interests are broadened by that engagement. And I've watched an increasing synthesis of work from multiple disciplines that takes bigger and bigger problems around rural spaces, from democracy and governance issues all the way through, the basic infrastructure, economic infrastructure issues. And it's really quite inspiring to watch. And it has the side benefit of being attracting political support for the research mission of the university.
Thank you, Professor Robel. Professor Mohammad, do you think that these are the prongs would actually adequately work in Malaysia or probably at your university?
Okay, yeah, we had recently a good argument about this issue as well. I think in terms of the most difficult part is actually in terms of measuring the impact of doing all of this. Yeah, on one side we have it is so much easier to measure the impact of publication. When we talk about citation, when we talk about publishing in high impact and so on. And people tend to really want to move away, and not necessarily not move away, but they want to be more connected to the industry and community by solving the issues and problems that the communities and industries have. At our university also, we have different centers that have been set up to address those connection with the industries and communities, with the hope that more researchers will be able to come sit down together as a multidisciplinary team and really tackle the issues and problems that the industries and communities have. But I think the thing is, how do we actually measure the absolute impact of this collaboration or of this integration between researchers and industry and community? I mean, you can do so many things, but at the end of the day, I'm not sure whether we will see a very strong, tangible impact to know that we are doing the right thing, And I think this is the biggest problem, because people can say that they have done a lot of things, but at the end of the day, did we see any big improvement coming out from those collaboration? So this is the most difficult part actually when we talk about trying to put a different measures on responsible research. I hope that there will be a good way to measure all this impact together, so that we can really see, and it should be balanced between this publication kind of measurement and the work that you do with the society and industry and so on. At the moment, I think the ranking, for example, is still very much heavier on this publication and citation side of it. And as a result of that, people still feel kind of, I mean, they will do something with the industry and community, but they, without a proper acknowledgement or without a proper measurement, the tendency is to still goes back to your publication impact and so on. So I think this is the main issue which still many universities are facing, and hopefully we can if we can come up with a better system that will balance all these things, all this measurement between those two, we will be in the right direction.
Thank you, Professor Mohammad. Professor Martin, do you think that the problems that other panelists and the strategies that other panelists have talked about, would you do things differently? And what is your reflection on the RAE, or the research impact exercise the universities are sort of looking at when sort of measuring, responsible research? Thank you.
I think listening to the other panelists, everybody is articulating similar opportunities and challenges. So what would we do different? Well, there's probably nothing that we would do different, but in many ways it's a point of emphasis. So we talk a lot about universities being environments where ideas can be explored, developed, critiqued, challenged. But as long as they remain ideas and stuck within the university, they're not doing anything. So we're very much thinking about impact, but we look at impact. There's clearly the academic impact, which is the traditional RAE world rankings. I'm not saying that's not important. It is important because that global community relies on that to feed that necessary discipline endeavor. And I don't think we should forget that. But then there's a range of other impacts that for us are important. There's a social impact, which is how do we influence policy, local government, national government, state government, so that we are acting as an honest broker in helping them formulate the right approach. It's critically important. We're looked on to do it. It's just really hard to measure. There's cultural impact because many of our universities go out there and they work in the creative industries, in theatre, in sport, in many other areas. Again, really hard to measure, but critically important. And then there's the one that certainly in Australia at the moment, our political leaders are absolutely focused on, which is the economic impact. How do we take our research and turn it into new industries, new products, new developments? And you have to have all of those. But I think three others have used the word ecosystem. This is a really complicated ecosystem. And like many ecosystems, it's not simply you pull lever X and get impact Y, because there's so many other factors in there. So I think my job as a University Vice Chancellor is to create that ecosystem that functions well with some clear drivers of what matters to the university and community. And to some extent, we've got to let people get on with it. I'm a bit of a cynic. I look around the world at universities. There aren't many great research ideas or new products that came out because the Vice Chancellor's executives sat around the room and said, we're going to do this. Where it's worked is we've employed great people and given them the environment to flourish and the signals of what we expect. So I think that's really my role, is to create and support that ecosystem. But at the same time, I've got to make sure that the drivers and levers see value in creating social, cultural, and economic impact alongside the academic impact. Because all too often, you can revert to type and you go into your academic discipline echo chamber and say, isn't it fantastic? I've had 5 papers in Nature.
Thank you so very much, Professor Martin. I mean, I'll sort of, I'll also, will be with you in terms of the other areas and the other ways of measuring, impact. Of course, my next question would be talking about impact only. And, we have one parameter in terms of peer-reviewed articles, high impact articles. How would you go about in increasing it? There's something, a measuring scale that you would see in and around the world, so how would you go about in increasing and pushing that, if you would, other than the other aspects that you have talked about? And in what ways possibly research collaboration amongst scholars, amongst in the universities would help, in attaining that goal? Would you like to respond to that? Yeah.
If you don't have that high quality scholarly activity, all of those other areas of impact will dry up in time. Sometimes it'll be a few months, sometimes it'll be a few years, but they will dry up. And it is around making sure that you've got the balance right in there, which is why I say, absolutely, those really top-notch publications that are regarded by your peers around the world are changing. Now, whether that's in a theoretical area or an applied area, it absolutely matters, because you can't do the rest without those ideas to take to the next stage. And again, I come back to this ecosystem. So it's about making sure that we've got the balance in there. And there will be and the other point is to do it well outside of a few disciplinary areas now, and I'm thinking philosophy and perhaps theoretical mathematics, it's almost impossible to work outside of a team. You can't do it on your own. So it's about saying within that team, we've got some great fundamental researchers, but we've also got the support mechanism and those that are enthusiastic about taking it to the next stage, building the company, building whatever else. So you've got to get that balance in there. And then as a leader, you've got to make it absolutely clear that you value both equally. Because if you only promote off the back of one or the other, academics are smart, they'll change their behavior and you'll break that wonderful ecosystem. So I think if I look over the last 20 years with what rankings have done, they've certainly focused our mind on what we do in terms of those very high impact publications. They've focused our mind on where else in the world is good at what we're doing so we can compare and possibly collaborate. But they are very, very, very blinkered. And I think you've just got to be very careful pursuing that on its own, because you will lose the support of the community that sits around you. And I think that's part of the journey that a number of us are having with the political environment in the moment, is we've probably gone too far that way and we need to reset somewhere in the middle. Create the ideas, but have the machinery to turn that into impact.
Thank you so very much, Professor Martin. Professor Mohammad, do you think that, you know, it's how would you go about in sort of, you know, attaining that balance, you know, given that high research impact articles and, you know, and publications are extremely important. You know, it shows a measuring scale, but as Professor Martin had said, that, you know, it's very important that you need to create that and sustain that ecosystem. How would you go about, and your general opinion about, you know, that being a measuring scale, the high impact research articles? Professor Mohammad, thank you.
Yeah, I'm trying to answer your question here. I mean, first of all, we have only one definition for high impact publication. Yeah, and this mostly would probably be tied up to the metrics of journal, which is the impact factor and how many citations and things like that. Can we have a different definition of high impact, for example, maybe 2 or 3 other definition of high impact? This is something that is keep you know, coming up to my mind, whether it's high time that we introduce another versions of high impact to sort of balance between these ideas. At the moment, it is very much skewed towards whatever that we have understand on the metrics of high impact publication. One thing that I would like to point out, and I've been thinking about this for quite some time. I mean, the way we are writing up our thesis, yeah, the way we are writing up our journal publication is the same way that we have been doing for the last, I don't know, maybe 50 years, 60 years. And we have been training our students to follow that sort of format up until now. And if you want to introduce a different ways of doing it, when you want to introduce more multidisciplinary nature, you want to introduce more collaborative work with society and industry and so on. I mean, it requires a different approach. Yeah, it requires a different ways of representing it. And this is, I don't know, I may be wrong, but I have not seen it being done very much in many universities, at least in my country. We are still working on the same thing that we've been doing, you know. So there is no opportunity for our students, for example, to really capture the essence of what we have been discussing today. Yeah, responsible research. Basically, they will just tackle whatever that they, in this narrow version that they understand, that, and they have seen people have been doing it that way. So if we can somehow formulate a different ways of measuring or defining a high impact that will incorporate or include all these other elements that we want, maybe we can come up with a better ways of doing it. And I wish that I can see journals now, different types of journal coming up for the university to or for the academics to go and publish, and it's going to be a refreshing way of looking at the high impact that we want to see. And this is again probably requires more discussion and you know, and someone who can drive this towards that. towards achieving the balance that you are saying. So thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mohammad. Professor Robel, hearing the other two panelists, how much effort would it take us to actually bring us back to that midpoint and to attain the balance? Thank you.
I want to come back, I think, as I try to respond to that question, to something Professor Barton said much earlier in the panel about in his modest way, about what is the purpose of academic leadership in the research mission. And you said quite rightly, you don't think it was ever a provost sitting around in a room dreaming up what faculty members should do that led to impact out in the world. We have to trust our faculty members, and our job is really, as academic leadership, is to hire great faculty members and give them the conditions to do their work well. We also have to give them the conditions to evolve the standards they use for judging impact. And I think I have seen over the course of my own academic career that younger faculty members have a more interdisciplinary approach. They work more in teams more naturally and more quickly and earlier in their careers than they used to. When I was evaluating tenure files, 20 years ago, and they are anxious for a way to have us understand and accept the need to feel an impact in the world, to feel a sense of purpose that goes out, that reaches outside the university. And I think as academic leadership, we should be able to do that. We should be able to help do that in a way that makes clear that all of the integrity around research, the accountability, the necessity of peer review is still there. We still have to do it right, but we could do it in ways that allow us to count the reinvigoration of a community. The ability of a community to engage in a kind of self-governance that is inclusive when it wasn't before, because of faculty involvement in that community using the research that they have produced. So I do think this is an imperative for us. And part of what we do as leaders is grant that permission, for that evolution. Even in the face of the rest of it, the rankings pressure and the political pressure, we still have that important role. We're not a static environment, and we can't be and still be good.
Thank you, Professor Robel. Professor Youmin, would you agree with most of what other panelists have said?
Yeah, I think it's a very challenging task for the academic leaders. We have mentioned about the ecosystem. Actually, the ecosystem, the operation mechanism of ecosystem is evolution. But as academic leaders, we are trying to intervene the direction of the ecosystem to evolve. So how for us to do that? I think that's a key issue for future, especially for the knowledge organization. So how for the university to create ecosystem and to create some intervention to help the ecosystem to run in the direction we are trying to develop the responsible research. I think the one is to create the ecosystem for both. One is personal interest in research, to support all the academic staff could conduct personal interest in research efficiently. But at the same time, as an institution, we should have institutional focus and strategy. So we could develop institutional platform or institutional themed centers or themed strategy, which will guide or help the personal interest in research to follow the university or the institutional strategy. And third, certainly, in order to have a more effective intervention in the knowledge community, two things are very critical. One is a professional or inner driver. Every professional should have their professional spirits and the quality system they are following. And another one is a system. We do need a system. No system, I mean systems, for example, the KPI system, the academic community standards. That's two sides for the community to help the individual to do things according to their personal interest and at the same time to contribute the university institutional strategy. So I think that's a balance for us to do that. So in future, I think research is a business which could emerge new ideas, not follow the guidance from the academic leader. So that's why eco is critical, but the ecosystem needs the guidance, needs the intervention of the academic leaders. So in future, academic leaders also should change their way to impact the academic ecosystem. It's not use authority or not use money, but it's use strategy to leverage the environment, and then let the knowledge workers to follow the strategy, to use their respond to the research strategy to meet to run in the direction of the institutional. So that's my understanding, and we have tried several cases in our university, Xi'an Jiaotong-Liverpool University.
Thank you, Professor Youmin. I think it's time for us to take a question from the audience. I think it sort of, connects to what you just said. The question is, there is a growing culture of researching for the sake of CV within quotes, rather than progression within quotes, and how, because of publish or perish mandate, how can responsible research ethics be nurtured under such institutional and policy environment? It's something that we have talked about a lot, about the ecosystem and the balance. Professor Youmin, would you like to take this question? The question, again, I'm repeating, there is a growing culture of researching for the sake of CV rather than progression because of publish or perish mandate. Yeah. How can responsible research ethics be nurtured under such institutional and policy environment?
I think that's a very challenging question, especially in Chinese context. Many Chinese public universities use a huge investment to push the publications, patents, and if you look at the numbers, they are great universities. But if you look at the quality, from the quality perspective, some of them are garbage. So that's a problem. So from the national level, policy level, government is keen to change the situation. They have issued the regulation, the policy to avoid the mechanism to only pay attention to the publications, to the numbers, to the SCI papers. That's a government policy. They are trying to push the professors or scholars to pay serious attention to the really academic problems. So that's a policy. But how for the university to nurture the ethics? I think two perspectives from my own practice. First, I'm trying very hard to develop our university as a quiet space. I mean, we pay less attention to the data, to the CV, to the publication. We want to create a quiet environment for the professors to follow their professional use their professional behavior to teaching, to conduct research. I think that's an institutional policy. If you pay serious attention, some university even pay the professors if the professor published a paper in the Science or Nature, they give the professor huge money as a reward. No, in our university, we don't use that system. We are trying to let our staff to understand that's our professional behavior. That's our purpose, to be a professor teaching and conduct research. So that's one perspective from our practice. Secondly, how for us to help the staff to do that without the impact from the external environment. So we needed to develop our own evaluation system, which will help us, our staff, to follow their inner heart, God, to do their research. So two perspectives. One is to develop an environment, and secondly, to improve our evaluation system, to let the people to do their business in a very friendly and quiet environment. So our university's culture is quite different with most of Chinese public university. That's why we attract many professors from the whole world to be here. I think when I asked them why for you to choose this university, they said, okay, this is a platform which can realize our dream, because we have worked in our own university. We can see clearly about our future, but here, this opportunity, this platform can help us to realize our other dreams, which I could realize in other places. So that's the way we used to promote the ethics of the research, to promote the integrity of ethical research.
I think it's very refreshing to hear, Professor Youmin. Professor Robel, what do you think of the publish or perish mandate?
I think there are many, many things that faculty members can find time to do that get in the way of research. And so there has to be constant expectation setting around the research mission. That said, for research to have integrity, research has to come from a place that builds on the past and established ways and is evaluated in ways that we all feel confident in. And we all know that some research, very good research, will take faculty members down dead ends, right? And we need to be able to have the space to and self-confidence in our evaluative processes to look at research and say, this is an important problem, and this is a step in pursuing progress towards the solution of this problem. I couldn't agree more with Professor Youmin. I just think it's at the center of who we are and what we do. And if we don't get that right, we can't get anything else right.
Thank you, Professor Robel. Professor Mohammad, do you see that there is a mad rush of filling up the CVs with a lot of publications, and how would you reflect upon this issue?
Okay, I mean, yeah, it's definitely. I think at least I can say in my country, and I believe in many other universities as well. I'm an editor with an Elsevier journal, and we see people submit papers, a lot of papers to our journal, and basically most of the papers are of low quality. I mean, yeah, that's why the rejection rate is like 80%. And people just rush to publish whatever they can in the hope that it will be accepted by the journal and then becomes part of their CV. And then again, because most universities would see the numbers rather than the quality of the work. The thing is, if they cannot publish it in this particular journal, then they can move towards another journal. And nowadays, you have heard about predatory journal, where they solicit papers and you have to pay a lot of money in order to get published in that particular journal without a proper peer review, etc. So it's something that is prevalent in the whole world, and it is becoming a concern actually. Yeah, and at the end of the day, when you look at the CV, people cannot differentiate. Very difficult to differentiate. If you have a long list of papers, you don't really know whether this is a very high quality papers or it's just basically junk, as Professor Youmin has said. So this is a big issue actually. I mean, I wish that when people submit an article to a journal, it is really of the highest quality. I mean, it covers a lot of aspects rather than just a small part of it just to get it published, etc. But how are we going to change this? I hope that all the universities will look into this as a matter of importance and try to find or develop a system of assessment within the university that will basically eliminate this issue. I mean, those who come with a lot of papers, whatever, but at the end of the day, when you see at the actual work, there's nothing big coming out from it, then we should say, no, you should stop. You are not of a good quality there. But I'm not sure whether this has taken place or not, because when people apply for promotion, the process itself can be, are not as stringent as probably you would like to wish for it, and people can just get away by showing a very extensive CV with publication, etc., and with without the real substance behind it. So maybe this is something that all the university leaders have to really think and consider the different ways of measuring the achievement of academics in that sense. Yeah. So yeah, I hope that something can be done on this matter.
Thank you, Professor Mohammad. Professor Martin, do you see the same way, the approach? Thank you.
Like so much of we've talked about today, this is a balance. There is no doubt there needs to be a level of expectation and clarity around the performance required to achieve faculty promotion or tenure or whatever system you work in. And that needs to be clear. It needs to be challenging but realistic. The flip side, however, is that the ethical integrity parameters within your institution have got to say there are no shortcuts to getting there. And you've got to balance those two out. But the latter around integrity trumps any desire to produce quantity or to take a shortcut in getting there. And that's a hard thing to do, but actually, if we lose the integrity, we've pretty much lost everything that we stand for as a university system. So it is so important we get there. It's hard, it's challenging, it is going, and not everybody in their research career is going to be able to progress and meet those challenging but realistic standards to get there. And we have to be honest about that as well. So it's one of the more, it's one of the harder bits of working with faculty colleagues around doing this, but it is a balance. I think part of this is good mentorship for young faculty. Part of it is some very clear guidance around those expectations. But also, we all need to be really clear as a sector that we speak out against predatory publishing practices. We speak out against some of the things that are beginning to undermine the integrity of that global academic publication ecosystem that we all rely on so much, because nobody works outside of that. So yeah, I think I agree with what everybody else has said, but probably with a real emphasis on that integrity piece, because if we lose that, we're in trouble.
Thank you all. Just about 5 minutes left, in our panel. So I have my final question. Maybe I'll start with Professor Martin, and then I follow with Professor Mohammad, Professor Robel, and Professor Youmin. It's about the one of the important things is about funding, right? Research funding, and that has to do with the implications, the negative implications of COVID. The funding is drying up. There's less of funding, and even if we want to balance, between responsible research to the research of kind, how would you go about how do you see this as a big problem? It's going to resolve sooner, or it's going to sort of be there with us for a while, and how that would challenge the overarching ecosystem that we have all talked about? If I may start with Professor Martin. Thank you.
Well, I think the first honest and realistic answer is there will never be enough funding to meet the ideas and aspirations and opportunities of all our faculty. There is no system in the world. So I think that's the honest thing. COVID has challenged us and will continue to challenge us for a few years because of the longer term economic fallout, in the same way that the 8-9 financial crash did, the 2000. But I think what it comes down to is, as an institution, being pretty clear about the areas that you want to invest and support building the capabilities that you think your university can make the greatest contribution in. You can never be unique. You can never do stuff that's not common. I don't know how many universities there are now, but it's those decisions to focus and prioritize where we can actually make a meaningful contribution. I'm not sure that some of my colleagues in Deakin would be happy. I would rather see a smaller amount of properly funded, really high quality research carried out than spread, as we'd say here, spread the butter too thinly on the toast, because you will just, everybody will be unhappy. So it's one of the biggest challenges we've got. We are certainly going to feel it in Australia with the change in the sort of global migration, everything else. It's going to focus minds. It's already focusing mine.
Thank you, Professor Martin. Professor Mohammad?
Okay, well, definitely COVID will force our government to really look into on how this funding mechanism should be prioritized. And I believe there is a need to do a very in-depth analysis of what are the issues and problems that needs to have the priority. Yeah, I think our government has announced that the funding for the research university, which is my university is part of it, is going to be reduced this year. So, and it has been reducing over the last 5 years. Yeah, coming to this year, and because of the pandemic, it will be reduced even further. So we have to sit down and really look into it. I just want to add a point. I wish that we can somehow think on ways to make the research funding more flexible in a way, to have it. The standard now is that you apply for research funding, you get some amount of money, etc., to do the research. Can we have a system whereby it is flexible? When you need something, you can apply and it can be quickly approved, and so on. So it is based on needs at that particular time. In that sense, people will be able probably to have a better planning for it, rather than you can imagine if you have finished your funding and then you don't have any money, you have to wait for another cycle to apply and so on. But if we can come up with a more flexible system that will authorize people to approve at a particular time, and this would probably give a different ways of managing and planning for your research. So if that can be done, maybe with the little amount of money that we have, we can plan for a better ways of doing research, in more efficient way of doing research. But definitely we need to prioritize the area or the focus of the research. Certainly.
Thank you, Professor Mohammad. Final 60 seconds to Professor Robel and Professor Youmin. Professor Robel first. Thank you.
Well, this has been a wonderful discussion. I have enjoyed so much all of the panelists this evening, my time. I'm very optimistic right now about research funding in the US, which is primarily, it also comes from our national government, and which has been reprioritized for the first time in, I would say, a decade. around scientific research and various kinds of research around even social science. So I'm bullish on the future of research here. And I agree very much with Professor Martin, though. Academic leadership, people in academic leadership positions are paid to exercise judgment around great values in the academy. And we have to prioritize, because we're always going to be in a boom and bust world with research funding. And we have to know which of our faculty members are headed towards answering important questions. And our job is to get the resources to keep them going, help them get there.
Thank you, Professor Robel. Professor Youmin, final 30 seconds to use.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Shortly, in China, there are two systems. One is a public universities. For public university, because the Chinese economic situation is good, so the public university would get more investment for the research. But for our university, we are run in a private way. We are international university, so we are facing more challenges in funding of our research. So at the university, we are developing the research fund to support the personal interest in studies, which nurture the ecosystem. But the more important way for us is to cooperate with industry sector to create the innovative ecosystem, which we can get more funding from the industry sector and external collaborators. Certainly, it's possible for us to get a small part of the national research fund. So that's our strategy to funding our research.
Thank you so very much. As we sign off, thank you, Professor Martin, Professor Mohammad, Professor Robel, and Professor Youmin for spending this wonderful 60 minutes with us. Have a great evening, morning, and afternoon, and signing off, Indranath Gupta. Thank you so very much. Thank you again to all the panel.